Hi, it's me, Andrzej. Hello, Zamoyski. And this is the new Africa Twin. Welcome to our increasingly less makeshift studio. There's me and this worm that flies in front of me. The truth is that probably few people have as much experience with this motorcycle as I do, because I managed to ride it in the African desert. I also managed to ride it on narrow trails around the Vistula. I took it with my wife, packed to the brim to Nordkap, and recently I tested the latest adventure sports version in Spain. Take a look at roughly how it all looked. Exactly. What makes the Africa Twin such a unique motorcycle? Let's go step by step, starting with the history. I won't recount now, but Dakar, not Dakar, all that, the 80s. Throughout all those 90s, everyone fell in love with this motorcycle. Even I stood there staring with my mouth wide open. I remember in one dealership, up until the moment when everyone missed this motorcycle so much, really, really missed it. In 2015, we finally got to rediscover it. And it was an incredibly difficult task to create a motorcycle that would satisfy all the hardcore, die-hard Africa Twin fans. Did they succeed? In my opinion, they succeeded twice over, because I don't know anyone who has a bad opinion about this motorcycle. Even if someone isn't a fan of adventure-type bikes, after taking it for a ride, they appreciate its advantages. Let's start from the beginning, because the base has remained the same for the last 3 years. A parallel twin engine with a displacement of 1,000, a steel frame, and a brilliant chassis. And here, the frame and chassis work together really well, because the engineers designed a frame that's connected to the engine at 6 different points with very delicate joints, so that everything works smoothly together and supports the suspension, which is fully adjustable and capable of handling extremely dynamic off-road riding. The next part is the balance of this motorcycle, because on paper it never really impressed anyone, and over the years working as an editor, I've learned that what's on paper doesn't always match how a motorcycle feels in your hands and between your legs. That's a rather average description. But the Africa Twin only has 95 horsepower, and it can weigh as much as a quarter of a ton. Let's not forget that. Now we have two base versions of the Africa Twin, one with a manual gearbox and one with a dual clutch automatic. And likewise, the Adventure Sport version comes in both manual and dual clutch automatic as well. You can see the weights for these somewhere here. Does that get in the way? No, absolutely not. This engine is so efficient because it has a crankshaft with a 90-degree offset over, say 270 degrees. The point is, it has a characteristic as if it were a huge single-cylinder engine. Every time you twist the throttle, there's an immediate response, which can even surprise motorcycles that are more off-road oriented than the Africa Twin. So what happened? And it was great. And then people started to complain a bit. Actually, from the very beginning, someone was always complaining. And what were they complaining about? That the fuel tank isn't big enough to take this motorcycle far. And they also complained that the suspension is too soft. I agree about the tank, or maybe I don't. Well, God, that's just how it was, and that's it. As for the suspension, I do agree, because yes, it was brilliant at always maintaining traction both off-road and on asphalt, but honestly, especially when you loaded up a passenger and panniers, well, damn, it would sway a lot. The faster you went, the more it swayed. Most of the time I used to blame the frame for that, but it turned out with the Adventure Sports that the problem wasn't there, and I have to admit I was wrong. And that brings us to the Adventure Sports. The year is 2018, which means a motorcycle with a 24-liter fuel tank, if you fill it up, a suspension that's 2 centimeters higher, improved damping, a different seat, a gadget compartment, a new electronic package. So what happens when we get this motorcycle? People complain, asking how a motorcycle can be called Adventure Sports and yet be even heavier than its predecessor. Exactly. Adventure Sports isn't a slogan that means this is a motorcycle for racing. It's actually a term referring to the very first Africa Twin Adventure Sport. And it doesn't mean sport. It means that with this motorcycle, we can go further. We can still ride it in a sporty way. We can go fast. But here the key word is adventure. So this adventure can be at a sporty level. Basically, we fill up the tank, blast through the desert, and see if we can make it even further. What kind of motorcycle is it overall? Well, damn. It's still an Africa Twin. It's still brilliant to ride. And now the shots you're seeing are of me riding the DCT version with a full tank, which weighs 253 kilograms. So what? Exactly. And it turns out that you can still ride this motorcycle very dynamically because it's brilliantly balanced and allows for perfect control. What's new? What has been improved? Well, the gauges have been improved. Exactly. The gauges, which people apparently complained about in the previous models, saying they were hard to read. So what did they do? Oh, they improved them so that, come on, Mr. Pavo, maybe we can show how they were improved. Everything is in one place with no breaks, so it doesn't get dusty. But I don't know if you can see it already. I think we can even see Mr. Powell, or now you can see my face because they use the type of glass that reflects everything. And that's probably the only downside I found in this motorcycle. They tried to put on a visor to make it more visible, but in my opinion, you would still need to stick on an anti-reflective film here so that everything wouldn't reflect, and so it would be more readable. But there's something important here that overshadows the fact that the gauges aren't always perfectly visible. These are the little dots, P, E, B, and T. What are they? P. That means it's the riding mode. So it's about power. The way power is delivered in the motorcycle. EB is engine brake, which means the adjustable engine braking force. And T, which is the 7-level traction control, which you can very easily turn off completely while riding by holding down the button. And that's a feature that's always been in the Africa Twin. Besides that, ABS off-road mode, you just hold down the button and it's deactivated on the rear wheel as well. Oh, right, regarding the downside. So actually, this ABS, okay, you can turn it off on the rear wheel, but unfortunately you can't completely disable it on the front, which I don't really like because when you're riding in really tough terrain, sometimes the ABS intervenes too quickly. But if you're heading into really tough terrain, you can just pull the fuse and not worry about it at all. And then there are the riding modes and advanced electronics. Everyone complains, oh no, more electronics in motorcycles again? It takes away the joy of riding. Nope, you're wrong. The more advanced and refined the electronics are, the safer and better you ride this motorcycle. Because now we have throttle by wire, which means the throttle isn't controlled by a cable, but by a potentiometer. So the computer knows exactly, even at high altitude or with poor quality fuel, it knows exactly how to manage the injection so that the motorcycle always responds optimally to the movement of the throttle. And it works. Traction control, 7 levels so that we can set how the motorcycle will slide when riding off-road. At level 1, if we are gentle on the throttle, know how to enter, and most importantly, exit corners with control slides, then this traction control won't limit us in that it will actually support us. If we want to learn this, we lower the levels from high to lower and keep trying, and eventually we get it. ABS, as I mentioned, still needs a bit of work here, but either way, in an emergency situation, you just grab the brake as hard as you can and the motorcycle will stop. As for these engine brake settings, what actually works? I don't really see much use for it, but everyone has their own preferences, you know. If someone wants to close the throttle to slow down more or just keep going, well, that's their choice. What's unique about this motorcycle is still the chassis. Just as I was impressed with the chassis of the previous model, here it's even better. They've changed the settings, the setup inside. Now, the suspension is not much, but percentage-wise, it rebounds a bit more slowly. It simply has a slower rebound, which also results in slower bottoming out. In practice, this means that the motorcycle stabilizes much faster when you hit any bumps. Going through a turn dip bump, whatever, the motorcycle just, bam! It stabilizes quickly, it doesn't wobble anymore. It's just as you would expect from one of the best motorcycles, not only in its class, but honestly in the world. The exhaust has been improved, it growls more, it's even more aggressive. The seat is insanely high, and that's really all there is to say about the seat height. This is a motorcycle for tall people, but it's important to note that the seat can be lowered by 2 centimeters as standard. And in addition, there are even lower versions available. So if you feel intimidated, maybe you don't need to be, because all it takes is to sit on one at the dealership, or maybe with a lucky friend who already owns one. So what now? DCT. Exactly, the topic of DCT. Manual or DCT. So once again, an automatic in a motorcycle. Why would I need an automatic in a motorcycle? I think that's what many people thought who now ride with DCT and wouldn't trade this motorcycle, this gearbox, for any other. The point is that, in my opinion, even off-road, despite the fact that this motorcycle is about 10 kilograms heavier, it's still worth going out with an automatic gearbox, especially if you don't have much experience, because you won't burn out the clutch, you won't stall the bike with the rear brake, and you'll also be able to focus much more on where you're going rather than on which gear you're in and having to constantly shift and fiddle with the gears. Personally, I really enjoy riding with this automatic because even when I'm going really fast on gravel roads, I just approach a turn and downshift with my left thumb, since you can switch gears manually at any moment. I downshift 1 or 2 gears, exit the turn with full throttle, just focus on where I want to go, control the slide, and when I hit the rev limiter, the next gear is immediately engaged and I don't even have to think about it. Personally, I really like that. And that's basically all the most important things, because if you want to read my more in-depth thoughts, you can find them in the latest issue of Shuat Motorcycling, where I break down the changes in much more detail. It's worth checking out, especially since the photos are interesting, because from what I can see, in none of them am I riding straight, and in some shots, I'm even catching a bit of air with this motorcycle, the DCT version that weighs 1/4 of a ton. Is it possible? It is. What's the most interesting and coolest thing about this story? The coolest thing is that I'm making this video because Honda is inviting you to take a ride on the new Africa Twin Adventure Sports. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can go to their nearest dealer, ask for a test ride, and instead of being turned away, you'll actually get to spend the day, or maybe even a bit longer, with this exceptional motorcycle.
Poland.
Listen, it's impossible to say everything about the motorcycle in one video. So if you need more information about comfort, fuel consumption, or anything else you're interested in, just let me know in the comments. We'll chat there and you'll find out everything, because I have to wrap up now. My dog wants to go outside. Bye.